What's a simple concept from your field of study that the average person doesn't seem to understand? Story 1. Librarian here. If you want your library to have new books, you must be prepared to get rid of the same amount of old books. Because I have to dispose of books secretly, as the public just don't seem to realize that we can't house a collection that grows by 10s or 100s of thousands of books every year. For the pedantic, I said amount rather than number for a reason. Books and archives are commonly measured in linear meters or kilometers, as that tells us how much storage space is required. Story 2. Orthodontist here. Making braces tighter does not make the teeth move faster. Have patients daily asking me to make the brace even tighter because they can take it and finish faster as a result. Teeth move quickest and most efficiently with very low sustained force application. It's like trying to get yourself out of quicksand. Yanking with all your might leaves you in exactly the same place, but slow, continuous, gently force gets you to where you want to go. Usually, after explaining this, they shrug as if I'm trying to pull one over on them and proceed to ask me to make it tighter next time. Story 3. People are not made to live forever, and modern medicine, while amazing, cannot make miracles happen. So many times we have a patient who is on a ventilator and unable to be taken off. Plus, their kidneys are shot and they are requiring continuous bedside dialysis. Plus, their heart is failing and they are on 4 continuous infusions of medication to make it function properly and prevent circulatory collapse. That is multi-system organ failure. Even if we can get one system back, the chances of a meaningful recovery are very slim. If I turn off any of my machines or a bag of one of their meds runs dry, they're gonna die because they are on a huge amount of life support, but the family still will be thinking they're gonna walk and talk out of the hospital. And even if they do live, a lot of them are going to get a trach and feeding tube and then go on to live the rest of their lives in a facility where they still need 24 HR care, where they may or may not still be ventilator dependent, where they likely cannot speak and definitely cannot eat or drink anything by mouth. Some will never, for the rest of their lives, be able to safely eat or drink by mouth again. Many will be incontinent and bedbound and likely never regain their strength back. If you ever have a family member in the ICU on life support, think long and hard about it because a lot of what we do to sustain life is literal torture. Story 4. There's 2 main reasons that when you cook a restaurant favorite at home, it doesn't taste as good. The person who made the dish used all of the things your doctor told you to avoid. It's full of butter and salt and all that good stuff. When you substitute healthy options, it doesn't taste as good. Or at least it doesn't taste the same. The people who made your dish have done it hundreds of times. Or thousands of times. You can get very good at a dish cooking it at home for yourself, but mastering a dish takes a kind of repetition that is rarely seen outside of a professional kitchen. Story 5. Physics teacher. Scientific literacy is pretty poor in general. Lots of people struggle to interpret a graph correctly. Lots of people struggle to distinguish between variables, like velocity versus acceleration. This is perhaps more niche for science education than the real world, but you'd be amazed how many people think skydivers stop completely or even shoot upwards when they open their chutes. Lots of people don't appreciate the difference between an absolute change, plus 10, and a proportional change, plus 10%. This has huge repercussions for all sorts of real-world problems, like their savings for retirement, house price, or debt. Story 6. Information technology, IT, involves a lot of Googling. A very relevant skill requirement is simply that we know how to Google efficiently and aren't afraid to poke at things to see what they do. Seriously, if you don't know, learn some basic browser search skills, like putting a word in quotes to make it required, using dashes to exclude certain words, using after date to filter by date, and so on. Story 7. Humans didn't evolve from chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are our nearest living relative species. Humans and chimpanzees both evolved from the same ancient species, which no longer exists in that form, but does still exist in the form of humans and chimpanzees. The fact that chimpanzees still exist does not disprove that humans evolved from other apes. Story 8. Psychologists, therapists, counselors are not there to give you advice or opinions. They may sometimes do that, but they should do so very infrequently, not including psychoeducation, where evidence-based techniques or facts are shared to hopefully aid a client in feeling better in some relevant area. That's what your friends are for. Therapists are there to help you talk to yourself in a way that helps you discover, organize, and understand your life and yourself better. so you can come to your own conclusions and your own decisions. Therapists are trained to be your mirror, to help you externalize what you have inside. Emotions, experiences, beliefs, etc. That's part of why you hear sometimes that therapists hold space. It's as though they hold up the walls of a space for you to throw all your stuff up onto, have a real good look at, and hopefully get a new perspective on it, or at least feel better afterwards due to the cathartic effect. Most people will never sit and truly talk to themselves, even in journaling, in a way that isn't just spiraling, reinforcing false beliefs and unhelpful blind spots. A therapist forces you to spend time with yourself and is trained to help you stay in that space and make real sense of what you choose to talk about in session. Also related, therapy is not for sick people, crazy people, disturbed people, it's for people. Story 9. I work in communications, and that every piece of work I produce has to be at a readable level for a 9-year-old. It's so time-consuming taking over complicated information and trying to simplify it. So if you work with a comms team, keep it straightforward and easy. Flowery language and big words will get cut. Story 10. In order to produce the color desired, one must first understand the relationships of colors and their contrasting components. There's nothing wrong with using prepared mixtures sold at stores, so long as you understand the limitations of each product and how to balance them. That's why you see brunettes with a green tint and unnatural oranges. You cannot paint without a primer any more than you can slap a chemical on your hair and expect magic. Story 11. Homeowners insurance covers the following type of damage. A sudden and one-time occurrence. 98% of all claims will come down to this simple concept. If your loss meets this description, it's most likely covered. If your loss does not meet this description, it's most likely not covered. There are some specific exceptions, but that's general guideline. Story 12. Correlation is not causation. Just because two things change together doesn't mean one causes the other. For example, ice cream sales and drowning deaths are correlated. It could mean possibly one. Eating ice cream caused people to drown, 2. When people drown, the survivors eat ice cream to make themselves feel better, 3. Both happen more often in the summertime, 4+. Other possibilities. This is used all the time when trying to push anti-science agendas. Story 13. Translation and localization are related, but not the same thing. If you need a technical document translated, you need a technical translator. If you need an ad from one country to be appealing in another, you need a marketing localization translator. Yes, sometimes there is overlap in skills, but that will cost you a lot more. Story 14. Most beef or meat in general you buy from a quality butcher's shop will turn brown or discolor in some way. It's due to oxidation and doesn't affect the quality of the meat in the slightest. The bright red meat standard is due to dyeing and gassing meat during the packaging process. Story 15. Statistics. I work in advertising marketing, and you can present statistics, particularly on popularity, to make anything look number one. I feel like a lot of people truly don't understand maths and can be swayed. I'm constantly skeptical. Story 16. A lot of people project a lot of bullshit on cultural traditions, and it drives me nuts. For instance, the European Middle Ages were less sexually repressed than people nowadays seem to think, because what they believe to be the Middle Ages is the Middle Ages as told through the lens of the prudish 19th century. And a lot of history is also told from the perspective of the middle or upper class. Housewives and the nuclear family are, historically, a fluke of a couple of decades, not obtainable for large parts of the world, working-class population, and not the traditional way of living. Classic European folk dresses are often 18th/19th century retroactive canonizations, interpretations of things that existed, but not in the same way that it is worn today. Maybe you see a pattern here. The 19th century has us still in a death grip and fucked us over majorly. Similarly, a lot of things we consider traditionally belonging to a certain culture just don't, or it's more of a shared effort or heavily inspired from other sources. Vinyasa yoga is an example for this, but also modern acupuncture. Many Christian denominations are a complete hodgepodge of ideas, and that is not a asterisk bad thing, asterisk it is a asterisk good thing asterisk, because it's what allows these ideas to be understood by a wide variety of people. It doesn't mean that these concepts, ideas, and practices are less valuable. It just means that it's not the best idea to legitimize or put value on cultural practices solely based on their purity or age, and feel attacked over the historical facts. It's not a good argument for what to do or not to do anyways. There's cultures that have, for thousands of years, practiced self-mutilation, and that's totally cool for them. But that fact doesn't convince me that I should do it myself. Even if you're fully aware of all that jazz, you can still enjoy the illusion of invented traditions. You can enjoy the idea that burning candles in your apartment to Wiccan chants connects you to your supposed witch ancestors, or that you're wearing the same kind of hat to church as your forefathers 700 years ago. That's all fine. It's how we tend to operate as humans. Knowing rationally at the same time that this notion is shaky at best doesn't make it any less valuable to you. So yeah, if you find out the hat is a 19th century reconstruction of a hat that never existed, that doesn't mean you have to burn it and never wear it again. And if somebody tells you the hat is a 19th century invention, you don't need to feel attacked over it, because it doesn't make the hat any different. FYI, not talking about a specific hat. That's just a made-up example. Story 17. Astigmatism isn't a disease or even really a condition. We've all got some amount from very little, insignificant, to a whole lot. It basically describes how your glasses or contacts need to be made, or how your LASIK or lens implant needs to be oriented. It is very simply that you need more correction in some places and less in others. A lens that's the same power 360 degrees around won't do the trick. Oh, and everyone gets cataracts if you live long enough. 100%. It's like gray hair. Story 18. Gonna do one from my fields of study and one from my field of work. Undergrad. Had to think about this. There is no exact legal definition to terrorism, but it is largely accepted as using fear, violence, and intimidation against a group of people based on their race, ethnicity, religion, political status, etc. Law school. Read a goddamn contract before you sign it. Also, the United Nations sucks and completely biffed it on the Cambodian genocide trials. Also, the First Amendment literally would not exist as it is without French influence. Field of work. Research the nonprofits you donate to, and also don't be an asshole, and say you only want funds to go directly to program work. We have to pay people to keep the organization running, so that's extremely short-sighted. Story 19. Transportation planner here. The concept of induced demand, while gradually gaining broader recognition, is still unknown to most people. The idea is that if you build X miles of new car lanes, by widening a freeway, say, within a few years people will be driving approximately X more miles, so you can't build your way out of traffic congestion. Many places have learned this the hard way, or in some cases have continued to fail, refused to learn it, hence the just one more lane bro meme. But it's quite simple and urgently important if we want to stop wasting money and land on approaches that just don't help. Story 20. Essential oils are not important oils. Breakthroughs achieved in laboratorium doesn't mean that it can be mass-produced the next day. More often than not, things fail in scaling up. No, we can't live 100% oil-free. You need polymers for, well, everything. You can choose to get those from oil drilling or from rainforest. Pick your poison. Biodegradable doesn't mean it will completely degrade the next day. Things will still pile up before it degrades. Use less instead. Story 21. In psychology, the concept of confirmation bias is often misunderstood by the average person. It's the tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs and ignore or dismiss evidence that contradicts them. Many people aren't aware of how this bias shapes their perceptions and decision-making, leading to a limited understanding of complex issues and reinforcing preconceived notions. Story 22. You were targeted for an ad? We have all the data we need about you, but we're still throwing shit at a wall to see what sticks. Also, if any song is so simple an idiot could write it, start writing and surpass us. The simplest pop song is meticulously crafted. Every song I personally hate for being lowbrow, it still took incredible talent to boil down anything into that simple of a phrase. Advertising and songwriting have a lot of weird overlaps, actually. Story 23. Grammaticality is determined empirically, not rationally. Language isn't logical. You can't use double negatives because two negatives make a positive. First of all, who decided that the negatives in a sentence get multiplied? If you add them, then two negatives make a negative. Second of all, language isn't math. Third of all, many languages do in fact have negative concord, double negatives. You can't use double negatives in standard English because you can't, because adult native speakers of standard English don't do it. Well, mostly. Sometimes they do it if they're affecting a certain jocular tone. You can't argue against it on logical grounds unless you're also arguing that standard French, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and Greek are incorrect for having negative concord. Story 24. Not my field, but I wanted to throw this in there because it fucking blew my mind upon hearing it. There is more than one type of infinity, and some infinities are larger than others. I think it was on a Joe Rogan podcast of all places that Neil deGrasse Tyson just fucking casually threw that out there and explained it. And I swear I immediately regressed from a human being to a fucking ape in a zoo, having its mind blown by a simple sleight of hand magic trick. I remember hearing it and being so confused that I turned it off and had to go and make a sandwich or something and just stared at the wall as I ate this sandwich, trying to get my head around there being more than one type of infinity. And that somehow there are infinities that are bigger than infinity.